By the time the lawyers arrived, everyone on the street already knew something had shifted. Not because of raised voices or police cars, but because the old man stopped sitting on the porch in the mornings. The single father noticed it first. He noticed most things. He noticed the newspaper piling up, the door staying shut, the quiet stretching longer than it should have. He had helped the man every day for years. Groceries, medications, small repairs, nothing official, nothing written down, just presence. The grandson said it wasn't personal. The paperwork said it was necessary, and in the space between what had been given freely and what could now be taken back, something irreversible waited to happen. If stories about quiet choices and unintended consequences matter to you, stay with this one. The father woke before the alarm most days, not because he wanted to, but because his body no longer trusted rest to last. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet of the house. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed somewhere down the street. Nothing else moved. He got up carefully, avoiding the loose board near the hallway door. He had meant to fix it months ago. Instead, he stepped over it each morning, the way people learn to live around small problems when larger ones take priority. In the kitchen, he packed a lunch for his son. The same sandwich as always, the same note folded once and slipped inside. He never wrote much, just his name at the bottom, so the boy would know it was his. The coffee maker clicked on. He stood at the counter and waited, hands resting on the edge, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. By the time his son came out of the bedroom dressed and quiet, the day had already taken its shape. They left the house together at the same time every morning. The father locked the door, tugged the handle once to be sure, and turned toward the sidewalk. 3 houses down, the elderly neighbor's place sat with its porch lights still on, even in daylight. It had been like that for years. No one remembered when it started. The old man was already outside. He sat in a wooden chair angled toward the street, a folded newspaper on his lap. He did not always read it. Sometimes it stayed folded the entire morning. "Mornin'," the father said. The old man nodded. "Mornin'." That was enough. It usually was. The father stopped by the porch, set his son's backpack down by the railing, and bent to pick up the grocery bags stacked near the door. He had dropped them off the night before after work. The milk needed to go inside. The father carried it in without asking. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cleaning solution and something older underneath it. The furniture was arranged carefully, as if it had not moved in years. The father placed the groceries on the counter, checked the calendar taped to the fridge. A doctor's appointment circled in blue. Tomorrow. He stepped back outside. The boy had climbed onto the porch step and was swinging his legs, careful not to touch the peeling paint. He watched the old man more than the street. "You ready?" the father asked. The boy nodded and slid off the step. The father handed him the backpack. The old man cleared his throat. "Thanks," he said. The father nodded once. He did not say "you're welcome." He never did. The words felt unnecessary, like pointing out something already understood. They continued down the sidewalk. At the corner, the boy glanced back once, then faced forward again. The father did not turn around. He knew what was behind him. This was how the mornings went. Predictable. Quiet. Useful. In the evenings, the pattern reversed. The father picked his son up from school, went to work, came home tired but steady. On nights when the old man needed something, the phone rang before dinner. Not late. Never urgent. Just enough to ask. A light bulb. A ride to the pharmacy. Help reaching something high in the cupboard. The father came over without comment. He brought his son sometimes, if it was early enough. The boy sat at the small kitchen table and did his homework while the men worked around him. No one asked him to help. He listened anyway. There were no conversations about why the father did this. No explanations to the boy. It was treated like weather. Something that existed without argument. The neighborhood noticed, in the way people do when something happens often enough to become background. A few neighbors waved. Some nodded. No one offered to step in. The arrangement had settled into place, and people assumed it would hold. The old man never talked much about his past. When he did, it was brief. a job he used to have, a wife who had died years earlier, a grandson who lived far away. The father listened without asking follow-up questions. He did not need details to understand what was being said. At night, after his son was asleep, the father sometimes stood at the front window and looked toward the porch light, 3 houses down. If it was on, he felt settled. If it wasn't, he waited a few minutes, then checked his phone. Most nights, it stayed on. Nothing about this felt temporary. There were no signs warning that it could change, no tension in the air, just repetition, layered day after day until it felt permanent. The father did not think of himself as essential. He thought of himself as available. There was a difference, even if he could not have explained it at the time. The boy went to bed believing the world worked this way, that if someone needed help and you were there, you stayed. And for a long time that belief went untested. The changes came in pieces, small enough to ignore at first. The old man moved slower. He took longer to stand from the chair on the porch. His hand shook when he reached for things, then steadied once he had them. The father noticed without reacting. He adjusted his pace. He waited longer before turning away. One morning, the newspaper was still folded when the father reached the porch. The old man was there, but his eyes were closed. Not asleep, just resting in a way that made the father pause. "You all right?" the father asked. The old man opened his eyes. "Just catching up," he said. The father nodded and went inside to put the milk away. He checked the calendar again. The appointment circled in blue had a note now. Bring list. That afternoon, the father drove the old man to the clinic for the first time. He took time off work without telling anyone why. The boy sat in the back seat, legs swinging, watching the buildings pass. The old man stared straight ahead. At the clinic, the father filled out the forms. He handed the clipboard back and forth, asked how to spell things, corrected what the old man forgot. No one objected. The receptionist smiled at him like this was normal. Afterward, they went to the pharmacy. The father waited while the prescription was filled. He read the labels carefully before putting the bottles into the bag. "Don't want to mix these up," he said. The old man nodded. Good thinking. From then on, the father kept track. He set reminders on his phone. He wrote times on sticky notes and placed them on the fridge. The old man followed them closely. When he forgot, the father reminded him. There was no frustration in it, just procedure. The boy learned the routine too. He watched his father check the bottles, saw him line them up on the counter. Sometimes the boy asked what they were for. "Just helping him stay steady," the father said. That was enough. The house 3 doors down began to feel less like a separate place and more like an extension of the father's own. He knew where things were kept. He noticed when something was out of place. When the light in the hallway flickered, he replaced it before it went out completely. He did not talk about this with anyone, not coworkers, not friends. There were no conversations to have. This was simply where his time went. The old man's needs stayed manageable. There were no emergencies. That was part of what made it easy to accept more responsibility without noticing it happen. Each task led naturally to the next. One evening, the old man missed a step on the porch. He caught himself on the railing, but his face tightened. The father was there. He put a hand under the old man's arm, steady but not forceful. "Got you," he said. They stood like that for a moment. The old man's breathing slowed. "Appreciate it," the old man said. The father helped him inside and made tea. He sat at the table while the old man drank it, not speaking, just watching. The boy did his homework nearby, pencil scratching against paper. Later that night, after they had gone home, the father replayed the moment in his head. The way the old man had leaned without hesitation. The way it had felt natural to catch him. The next morning, the porch chair was moved closer to the door. The father did not ask why. He just noticed. Other people must have known the old man needed more help now. The signs were visible, but nothing changed. No new faces appeared. No offers were made. The father became the person who knew. He knew when the trash went out. He knew when the mail arrived. He knew which days the old man felt better and which days he didn't. This knowledge came with weight, though it did not feel heavy yet. It felt like something he could carry, The boy began to anticipate stops. He waited by the porch when they walked past. He handed his father tools without being asked. Once, when the old man thanked him directly, the boy looked surprised. "You're welcome," the boy said carefully. The father watched him say it. He did not correct him. By the end of the season, the father no longer thought in terms of helping. He thought in terms of responsibility. The shift was quiet and complete. Nothing had gone wrong. That was the most dangerous part. The first time someone treated him like he was in charge, the father almost corrected them. It happened at the pharmacy. The old man stood beside him at the counter, hands resting on the edge, listening. The clerk looked from the computer screen to the father. "These need to be taken with food," she said. Not to the old man, but to him. The father nodded. "Breakfast and dinner," he said. The old man glanced at him, then back at the clerk. Nothing was said. The exchange passed without comment, but the father felt it register somewhere deeper than he expected. Not pride, just awareness. After that, it happened more often. At the clinic, the nurse asked him about symptoms. On the phone, a utility company asked him to confirm an address. When a letter arrived that the old man didn't understand, he brought it over and set it on the table without explanation. The father read it aloud, slowly, then folded it and placed it back in the envelope. He never introduced himself as anything more than a neighbor. He did not use words like caregiver or guardian. Those felt too official, too heavy for what this was. Still, decisions began to settle on his shoulders. He hesitated before making them. He asked permission even when it wasn't required. "You think that's all right?" he'd say, holding up a piece of mail or pointing to a note on the calendar. The old man would nod. "You know better than me these days." The father didn't like hearing that. He didn't argue either. The house grew quieter as the old man spoke less. Not because he had nothing to say, but because it took more effort now. The father learned to read pauses. He waited without rushing. When the old man lost his place mid-sentence, the father didn't fill it in. He let the silence sit until the words found their way back, or didn't. The boy watched all of this. He noticed how adults spoke around his father now, how they looked to him first. At school, when a teacher asked what his dad did, the boy shrugged. "He helps people," he said. That felt accurate enough. One afternoon, the father found a folder tucked into a drawer in the old man's desk. He hadn't been looking for it. He had been searching for batteries. The folder was thin. Inside were a few papers, an old insurance policy, a handwritten list of phone numbers. At the bottom of the list was a name the father recognized. The grandson. The address was crossed out and rewritten. The phone number was old. The father closed the folder and put it back where he found it. He didn't mention it. Later that evening, while he was fixing a loose hinge on the back door, the old man spoke without looking up. "Haven't heard from him in a while," he said. The father kept working. "That happens." The old man nodded. "He's busy." The father didn't respond. He tightened the last screw and tested the door. It closed cleanly. From then on, the name surfaced occasionally, never with bitterness, just fact. The grandson lived far away. He worked in an office. He had his own life. The father listened and filed the information away without attaching meaning to it. He didn't consider himself a replacement. He didn't think in those terms. Still, something had shifted. The old man relied on him not just for tasks, but for direction. When to leave the house, what to wear to appointments, whether a pain was worth mentioning. The father answered carefully. He chose words that didn't alarm. He learned to say, "Let's keep an eye on it," instead of "That's a problem." At night, he sometimes felt the weight of it press in unexpectedly, while washing dishes, while folding laundry. The sense that he was standing in a space that did not belong to him but had been left unattended. There were no rules for this role, no training, no one to hand it off to. It existed only because someone needed it filled. The neighborhood continued as before. Lawns were mowed. Cars came and went. People waved from driveways. No one asked questions. The arrangement was invisible because it was quiet. One evening, the old man handed the father a set of keys. He did it without ceremony, holding them out like an afterthought. "In case," he said. The father took them and felt their weight in his palm. He didn't ask what they were for. He knew. "All right," he said. He put the keys in his pocket and didn't mention them again. That night, the porch light stayed on later than usual. The father noticed from his front window. He stood there for a moment longer than he needed to. He was careful not to name what this had become. Naming it would have made it real, and real things came with expectations. For now, it was just what needed to be done, and he was doing it. That was enough. The grandson arrived on a Tuesday. The father noticed the unfamiliar car first. It was parked too close to the curb, angled slightly wrong, as if the driver wasn't used to streets like this. Clean, newer than most of the cars on the block. The father slowed his steps without realizing it. The old man's porch light was off. The father stopped at the gate. He stood there longer than necessary, listening. A voice carried from inside the house. Younger, steady, controlled. Not loud, but confident in a way that filled the room it came from. He did not knock. He waited. After a moment, the door opened. The old man stood there, one hand on the frame. He looked smaller than usual, his posture slightly bent forward. Behind him was the grandson. He was well dressed, but not formal. Button-down shirt. Sleeves rolled just enough to suggest effort without sacrifice. He smiled quickly when he saw the father. "You must be the neighbor," he said, stepping forward and offering his hand. "I'm his grandson." The father shook it. The grip was firm, measured. "Good to meet you," the father said. "Thank you," the grandson said, still smiling, "for everything you've been doing." The words landed heavier than expected. The father nodded. "No trouble," he said. The grandson stepped aside to let him in. The house felt different with someone else standing in it. Smaller. The furniture seemed closer together. The old man sat down without being asked. They talked for a while. About the drive, about work, about how long it had been since the grandson last visited. The father stayed near the door at first, then moved to the chair he usually took at the table. He listened more than he spoke. The grandson asked questions. Not too many at once. He asked about routines, appointments, medications. He took out his phone and typed notes as the father spoke. "That's helpful," the grandson said. "Really helpful." The old man watched them both, eyes moving back and forth. He said little. When he did speak, it was to confirm something the father had already said. At one point, the grandson asked about the keys. The father paused. He reached into his pocket and set them on the table. "In case," he said. The grandson nodded slowly. He picked them up, turned them over in his hand, then set them back down. His smile didn't change, but something in his posture did. "That makes sense," he said. "We'll want to formalize some things, though, just to be safe." The father didn't ask what he meant. The next day, the grandson was still there. And the day after that, the rhythm of the house changed quickly. The father found himself waiting instead of acting. He hesitated before reaching for things. He checked for permission that had never been required before. The grandson was polite, always calm. He thanked the father often. But he also redirected conversations, took calls in the other room, closed doors that had always stayed open. On Thursday, the grandson asked the father to meet him at the kitchen table. The old man was resting in the bedroom. "I just want to make sure we're all on the same page," the grandson said. The father sat down. He folded his hands in front of him. "I really appreciate what you've done," the grandson continued. "Truly. But there are certain risks when care isn't documented. Liability issues, medical decisions. It gets complicated." The father nodded. He waited. "I've spoken with an attorney," the grandson said. "Nothing aggressive, just guidance. We want to make sure everything moving forward is appropriate." The word appropriate stayed in the air. "So what does that mean?" the father asked. "It means we'll need to limit informal involvement for a bit," the grandson said, "until things are properly arranged." The father looked at the table. There was a scratch near the edge he hadn't noticed before. He traced it with his thumb. "For a bit," he repeated. "Yes," the grandson said. "Temporary." The father stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. "All right," he said. That afternoon, the porch light stayed off. The father walked past the house with his son and did not stop. The boy slowed, confused. "Are we not helping today?" the boy asked. "Not today," the father said. The next morning, an email arrived, polite, brief, from a law office. It outlined expectations, boundaries, a transition plan. Nothing in it accused him of wrongdoing. Nothing thanked him either. The father read it twice. He did not reply. On Saturday, the grandson returned the keys. He handed them back carefully, like something fragile. "Just until things are settled," he said. The father took them. He felt the weight again, different now. "Understood," he said. The grandson nodded. "This isn't personal." The father did not respond. He put the keys in his pocket. That evening the old man did not call. The father stood at his front window after his son went to bed. The porch, 3 houses down, was dark. No chair, no light, no movement. For the first time in years, the routine had been interrupted, and there was no clear way back into it. The quiet that followed did not arrive all at once. It crept in, filling the spaces where habit used to sit. The father felt it most in the mornings. His body still woke early, his hands still moved through the same motions. But when he reached the door, there was nothing waiting to pull him 3 houses down. He walked past the old man's place without slowing. The porch stayed empty. The light never came on. The newspaper was gone. At first he expected a call. Not from the old man. From the grandson. Something logistical. Something that would make use of what he already knew. It didn't come. Instead, there were emails. Short, carefully worded. They thanked him for his cooperation. They reminded him of boundaries. They asked that any future concerns be directed through proper channels. He read them once, then archived them. The boy noticed the change before the father explained it. On the second morning, he stopped walking and pointed. "Why is his chair gone?" the boy asked. "I don't know," the father said. On the third morning, the boy asked again, "Did we do something wrong?" The father stopped this time. He crouched so they were eye level. "No," he said, "we didn't." The boy nodded, accepting the answer without understanding it. He kept walking. The father's phone stayed quiet. Too quiet. He found himself checking it anyway, scrolling through old reminders. Medication times. Appointment alerts that no longer applied to him. He deleted them one by one, carefully, like he was dismantling something fragile. At work, he was less focused. He stared at screens without absorbing what was on them. A coworker asked if he was tired. "Just adjusting," he said. No one asked to what. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped him while he was taking out the trash. "Hadn't seen you over there lately," she said, nodding toward the old man's house. The father tightened the bag and set it in the bin. "Things changed," he said. "Oh," she replied. "Well, that happens." She smiled, uncomfortable, and went back inside. The father stood there longer than necessary, staring at the closed door across the street. The house looked the same. That was part of the problem. Nothing visible explained the absence. Days passed, then weeks. The grandson's car came and went. Sometimes a different car appeared. Home health aides, maybe. The father didn't ask. He watched from a distance, aware of how easily concern could be misinterpreted now. Once, he saw the old man through the front window. He was sitting in a different chair, closer to the television. His posture was rigid. The father raised a hand without thinking. The old man did not see him. That night, the father dreamed he had forgotten something important. He woke with the feeling still pressed into his chest, but no memory of what it was. The emails continued. Fewer now. More procedural. One of them mentioned a formal care plan. Another referenced updated documentation. None of them asked for his input. He typed a response once. Just a sentence. "If you need anything clarified, I'm available." He stared at it for a long time. Then he deleted it. The boy began asking different questions. Who helps him now? Does he still take the blue pills? Is he mad at us? The father answered what he could without speculating. He kept his voice even. He did not speak badly about the grandson. He did not defend himself either. He has people now, he said. Yes, he said. No, he said. The boy accepted the answers, but something in his posture changed. He stopped waiting by the porch when they passed. He kept his eyes forward. One evening, the father found the old set of keys in the drawer where he placed them. He hadn't moved them since they were returned. He took them out and set them on the table. They looked smaller now, less important. He thought about knocking, about asking how the old man was doing, about making it clear that he was still willing. But he also thought about the email, about the phrase informal involvement, about how quickly something given freely could be reframed as a risk. He put the keys back in the drawer. A week later, a letter arrived. Not an email this time. A printed notice. It informed him that his assistance was no longer required and asked that he refrain from entering the property without prior consent. The language was neutral, precise. The father folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the keys. That night, the boy sat at the kitchen table while the father washed dishes. "Are we not allowed to help people anymore?" the boy asked. The father turned off the faucet. He dried his hands slowly. "We can help," he said. "We just have to know when to stop." The boy considered this. He nodded once, but his face stayed serious. Outside, the street was quiet. The porch 3 houses down remained dark. The father stood at the window before bed as he always had. Only now there was nothing to look for. The absence had settled into place. And it was clear it wasn't going to move on its own. The father stopped checking the window after that. Not all at once. Just gradually, the way habits fade when they stop being useful. He still passed the house every morning. He just no longer searched it for signs. The space that opened up in his day felt wrong at first. Too quiet. He found himself finishing tasks earlier, standing in rooms with nothing immediately demanding his attention. He cleaned the loose board in the hallway. He fixed a cabinet hinge that had been crooked for years. Small repairs he had delayed without realizing it. None of it filled the gap. The boy noticed the change in different ways. He came home from school and dropped his backpack by the door instead of carrying it to his room. He sat longer at the table after dinner, staring at nothing. He didn't ask about the old man as often, but when he did, his questions were more careful. One evening, as the father sorted through mail, the boy stood beside him. "Do you miss him?" the boy asked. The father paused. He held an envelope in his hand, thumb resting on the corner. "Yes," he said. The boy nodded. He didn't say anything else. He went back to his room. Later that night, the father sat alone in the living room. The television was off. The house felt larger than usual. He thought about the years that had passed without him marking them, how easily care had become routine, how he had mistaken consistency for permanence. He had believed that being there was enough, that showing up protected the thing itself. He saw now that it only protected the moment, not what came after. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It surfaced through ordinary things, through the unused reminder app on his phone, through the tools he no longer carried in his jacket pocket, through the calendar with fewer notes written in the margins. One afternoon, while walking home from school, the boy slowed near the old man's house. The front window was open. A different voice carried out. A woman's voice, professional, rehearsed. The father gently guided the boy forward. They reached their own porch. The boy sat down on the step and didn't move. "Why didn't they ask you to stay?" the boy said. The father sat beside him. "They didn't need me anymore," he said. The boy frowned. He looked at the ground, then back at his father. "But you were already there," he said. The sentence was simple, not accusing, not confused, just factual. The father felt it land. He didn't answer right away. That night, he opened the drawer with the letter and the keys. He read the notice again. The language hadn't changed. Still neutral, still distant. He folded it carefully and put it back. He thought about replying, about asking for clarity, about offering help under their terms. But each option came with a cost he understood now. Staying would mean accepting a version of himself reduced to permission. Leaving meant accepting that his presence had never been protected. He slept poorly, not from anxiety but from a dull awareness that something had ended without ceremony. In the following days, he noticed how often he had acted without being asked, how much of what he gave had relied on trust rather than structure. He did not regret it, but he stopped defending it in his mind. At work, he turned down extra hours for the first time in months. He went home earlier. He cooked dinner instead of reheating something quick. The boy noticed. "You're home," the boy said. "Yes," the father said. They ate together at the table. No television, just food and quiet. The boy talked about school, about a project he was working on. The father listened fully, without checking the time. Later, while washing dishes, the father caught his reflection in the window. He looked older than he remembered. Not worn, just changed. He understood now that help, when it exists outside of structure, can be taken back without explanation. That presence, no matter how steady, does not grant permanence, and that stepping away did not erase what had happened, but it did end his role in shaping what came next. The porch 3 houses down remained dark. The father no longer waited for it to change. He began, quietly, to prepare for a decision that would make that darkness permanent in a way he could not undo. The decision did not arrive with clarity. It came through repetition, through the same thought returning at different times of day, unchanged each time. The father stopped pretending there was a version of this where he stayed involved without losing something essential. The email inviting him back arrived on a Thursday evening. It was brief. The tone was careful. The grandson wrote that the care plan was now in place, that oversight had been established, that limited assistance from trusted neighbors could be reconsidered, pending agreement with outlined conditions. An attachment followed. 3 pages. Rules, access windows, reporting expectations, a requirement that all interactions be logged. The father read it once. Then again. None of it was unreasonable. That was the problem. It reframed what he had done for years into something monitored, something that required justification. It did not accuse him of anything. It simply removed trust from the equation. He printed the document and set it on the table. The boy came in from the living room and looked at it. "What's that?" the boy asked. The voice asked. "Paperwork," the father said. The boy nodded and went back to his book. The father sat alone at the table for a long time. He thought about the porch mornings, the clinic waiting rooms, the quiet understanding that had existed without language. He thought about how easily it had been replaced. He signed nothing. The next morning, he folded the pages and placed them in the drawer with the keys and the letter. He did not write back. Silence felt more honest than explanation. That afternoon, the grandson's car was in the driveway again. The father watched from across the street. The old man did not appear at the window. He could have crossed the road. He could have knocked. He could have said yes to the conditions and continued in a reduced form. No one would have blamed him. Instead, he turned away. The external cost made itself known slowly. Neighbors stopped mentioning the old man to him. His name faded from casual conversation. The assumption that he was responsible dissolved. One evening, a package was delivered to the wrong address. The label bore the old man's name. The father stood on his porch holding it, weighing the decision. Then he walked it over, set it down, rang the bell once, and stepped back to the sidewalk. The grandson answered. He nodded politely. "Thank you," he said. The father nodded back and left without speaking. At home, the boy watched him hang up his jacket. "You didn't stay," the boy said. "No," the father replied. "Was that hard?" "Yes," he said. The boy accepted the answer. He did not ask why. In the days that followed, the father felt the absence more clearly, not as pain, but as loss of role. There was no one to check on, no calendar to manage, no small emergencies that needed him. He had chosen dignity over usefulness. The cost was quiet, but permanent. One night, he took the keys out of the drawer and held them for a moment. Then he placed them in an envelope and wrote the grandson's address on it. He mailed them the next morning. The drawer was empty afterward. That was the moment he understood there would be no return. Not later, not in another form. The choice had closed the door completely. He did not feel relieved. He felt settled. The boy adjusted faster than he expected. Children often do. They observe what is modeled and move forward with it. The father made sure the model was clean. They found new routines, different routes, evenings spent together without interruption. Still, when the father passed the house 3 doors down, he felt the shape of what had been lost. Not the work, the trust. He had stepped away without argument, without spectacle, without trying to be remembered. That, he knew, was the price of staying decent when decency is no longer efficient. The street remained the same, but the space he no longer occupied did not wait for someone else to fill it. The street settled into its old patterns without effort. Trash days stayed the same. Lawns were cut on Saturdays. Cars lined the curb in the evenings and disappeared again in the morning. Nothing announced that something had ended. The old man's house remained occupied, but quieter in a way that was hard to describe. Curtains stayed drawn longer. Lights came on later. The porch chair never returned. The father noticed, but he no longer tracked these changes. He passed the house with the same pace he kept past every other one. If he looked, it was brief, not searching, just registering. Morning shifted. He and his son left the house a few minutes later now. There was no reason to be early. The father still locked the door and tugged the handle once, but his body no longer leaned toward the third house down. The boy walked beside him, hands in his pockets. One morning, they took a different route to school. It wasn't intentional. The father simply turned at the corner instead of continuing straight. The boy followed without comment. They passed a small park they hadn't used in years. The swings creaked in the wind. "Can we stop here sometime?" the boy asked. "Sure," the father said. They kept walking. Weeks passed. Then more. The grandson's car appeared less often. Other cars replaced it. The father couldn't tell who they belonged to. He didn't try. One afternoon, as the father unloaded groceries from his trunk, he saw the old man for the first time in months. He was being helped out of a car by a woman in a uniform. He moved slowly, carefully. His face looked thinner. The father paused with a bag in his hand. The old man looked up. Their eyes met across the distance. For a moment, neither of them moved. The old man lifted his hand slightly, not a wave, just acknowledgement. The father nodded once in return. That was all. The woman guided the old man inside. The door closed. The father finished unloading the groceries. He carried them inside his own house, set them on the counter, and put them away. The motions were practiced. Steady. That evening, the boy sat at the table while the father cooked. "Was that him?" the boy asked. "Yes," the father said. "Is he okay?" "I think so," he replied. The boy nodded. He did not ask anything else. After dinner, the father took out the trash. He stood at the curb longer than necessary, looking down the street. The porch light 3 houses down flicked on briefly, then off again. He did not feel the urge to act. Later, after the boy was asleep, the father sat alone in the living room. He did not turn on the television. He listened to the house settle around him. The familiar sounds returned. Pipes, floorboards, distance traffic. He thought about what had changed, but not in terms of right or wrong. Only in terms of what was no longer required of him. The space where obligation had lived was empty now. Not painful, just open. The next morning, he packed the same lunch, the same sandwich, the same note, his name at the bottom. When they stepped outside, the air felt cooler. Fall had moved in quietly. Leaves gathered along the curb. They walked past the old man's house without slowing. The boy did not look back. At the corner, the father stopped. "This way today," he said, pointing toward the park. The boy smiled slightly. "Okay." They turned together. Behind them, the street continued as it always had. Houses held their silence. Doors stayed closed. Life moved forward without ceremony. The father did not believe the years he spent helping had been erased. They remained where they had always been in the past, complete and unchanged. But they no longer reached into the present. That was the difference. As they walked, the father adjusted his stride to match his son's, not out of habit, out of choice. The park came into view. The swings were still empty. For the first time in a long while, There was nothing waiting for him beyond the next step, and that, he realized, was the quiet proof that something in the world had shifted and would not shift back.